Good afternoon, everybody. We are live. Thanks for joining Genevieve's Burford and Brothers today. My name is Kyle Clark. If you haven't already joined one of these webinars before, we try to host them quarterly or just about every other month. And today we are featuring a topic based on marriage and money with a featured speaker, Peter Dunn, aka Pete the Planner. So thank you for joining here at your lunch hour on this Wednesday afternoon. We do appreciate your time. We hope you find the presentation insightful. Maybe it sparks some questions with your spouse or significant other or partner. And we hope you do find some value in it. So thanks for pulling up your LaCroix or your Pepsi, your sandwich, salad, buckhorn sandwich, your Freebirds burrito, and feel free to kick back and relax. I am going to introduce here Pete the Planner himself. He's an award-winning comedian and an award-winning financial mind. Some of you may remember him from our presentation about 2 years ago, and he's back with us today. He's also been a USA Today columnist and the author of 10 books. So we are very grateful to be with Pete today and have him go through his marriage and money presentation. And without further ado, I will kick it over to Mr. Pete the Planner. Thanks, Pete.
No, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me. I have to admit, saying that I'm an expert on money and marriage makes me think, remember when the Oprah Winfrey show used to be on and they'd have like a marriage expert on, and then like a month later, you'd read the newspaper that the marriage expert got divorced? I just want to make it very clear. I am a financial expert who's going to talk about marriage. I am not claiming to be a marriage expert. And that will be especially important to say if any of you choose to send the recorded webinar today to my wife. So I just needed to get that out of the way. By the nature of what I do, people talk to me with their significant other about money all the time. And very much, I feel like part of the clergy, that people tell me their deepest, darkest marriage and money secrets in a room. I've been in scenarios where people are screaming at each other, screaming at me. I've learned words in the midst of these meetings. And so what I'm going to do today is I'm going to give you my best practices of how do you avoid screaming at your significant other in a financial person's office. That's what I was going to call the workshop today, but it would not fit on my screen. I like to think that the majority of problems financially that exist in a relationship, a committed relationship, come from two different areas. The first is two different people raised you. You have to understand that what you learned about money or what you didn't learn about money is a byproduct of your upbringing. And in almost every case, you were raised by a different set of parents or people or loving adults than your significant other was. So that is to suggest there's going to be some inherent differences, despite the fact that some of them might even both be positive experiences. They're going to be different. So much so that it gets us to our first point of distinction. And that is where you are on the stuff versus stability spectrum and where your significant other is on the stuff versus stability spectrum. It is now time for me to describe what in the heck the stuff versus stability spectrum is. Here's what it is. Every single one of us on this call is somewhere on the spectrum. And it means when we get extra money in our life, and you can define extra however you like, are you more inclined to buy stuff, new stuff, replacement stuff, better stuff, upgraded stuff, or are you more likely to use that money to create financial stability? I'll go as far as to say, I'm currently in a stability, on the stability spectrum right now in my life. In my early 30s, I was definitely in the stuff category. And who knows, later on in my life, I might be in the stuff category. But where a lot of differences occur are that two people in a relationship are often not in the same place when it comes to stuff and stability. And even worse for your financial life, if you're both in the stuff acquisition phase of your life, someone has to break you out of it. This really is about accountability. It's about being able to look at your life partner and say, hey, we're in this together financially. One of us has to shake the other person out of their stupidity from time to time. And I like to employ a little technique called Pete. And you're thinking, wow, what a narcissist. He named a technique after himself. And I did, but I never call it this when I do this at home with my wife. So, but I'm going to share it with you now. These are my 4 concepts I like people to think about when it comes to money and marriage. The first is patience. It's funny how we lose patience with our loved ones faster than anyone else, short of being on hold at like a cable company customer service or something. We tend to not give our loved ones our best selves at times, especially when it comes to something as high stress as money. So patience is a big issue. The second E, the first E, I should say, is equality. I tend to think that both people in a relationship should have equal vote. Now, there was a point in time culturally where people would get votes based on the amount of money they made. I mean, you can even get through gender, socialization, how you grew up, who got to make decisions, who made the money. And a lot of times, households were dominated by male decision making only because culturally men were making the majority of the money. As most of us have learned, that's absurd. That is sort of an absurd way to do things. And so equal votes is important. Despite education levels, despite how we were raised, each person getting equal say is important, which of course leads to the need for compromise. Next, with the T, we get into trust. Now, this is a slippery slope. It's quite possible you don't actually trust your significant other with money the same way my wife does not trust me to do home improvement projects. She neither trusts me to actually start them or trust me to complete them to a satisfactory manner. But that doesn't mean she doesn't trust me with other areas of her life. You may have someone in your relationship, and let's just assume it's the other person, who is on the stuff side of the spectrum. If they get money and burning a hole in their pocket, it will be a problem. Or you may have someone who tends to go into credit card debt because that's how they were raised. Just because you don't, in a snapshot, trust your significant other with money doesn't mean all is lost. The key to this is to not lose faith in your partner. You will not trust them from time to time, and that is not a violation of your marriage. And the more you can talk about that, the better. But if you lose faith in them, that's where there's a problem. And finally, what is the one thing that makes people lose faith in their partner financially more than anything else? It is the second E, and that second E stands for effort. Effort. The biggest issues I see are when people stop trying. And when I hear people say, well, I do it because my husband just refuses to care. Or I do it because my wife, she just doesn't care for that. That is a problem. That is a significant problem that doesn't actually go away. It's important to understand what it is to have your financial life be better 12 months from now on a relative basis. Here's what I mean. You and your significant other both have a different idea of what it is to be better financially 12 months from now. Maybe your spouse says, oh, we finally live in a better apartment, or we're driving a nicer car, or we went on a better vacation, or we were finally able to buy nicer clothes or go to a better restaurant. Whereas the other partner may say, well, it's better if we have less debt or we have better savings account balances. This is a challenge because of the 3 types of financial goals, the first being consumption, that's purchasing, the second being debt elimination, and the third being accumulation. Those are 3 really good financial goals: consumption, debt elimination, and accumulation. But if 2 people in a relationship decide to take their income and go in different directions with it, then you get a separated household from a financial perspective. The reality is, as a household, I do know for a fact both people want 3 things. They want a solid household income to live a good lifestyle. They don't want financial stress. Surely enough, this is why people don't talk about money. It is one of those cruel tricks of the universe that you will actually have less financial stress if you fix the underlying problem. Too many couples try to cope with financial stress. Like on this call, and we're not going to do it, I'm not going to go around and ask people's stress level, but let's say I did, and someone answered to say, well, I'm a 6 out of 10. It's not that bad. I'm a 6. Okay. But if I looked at your finances and they're terrible, hey man, maybe it should be a 10. Maybe the fact that you don't think it's stressful is the problem, right? Maybe you're not caring enough, which then goes into effort. And when you get two people with two stress levels, what can end up happening is one person won't be stressed. The other person is stressed. And the fact that the one person isn't stresses out the stressed out person even more, and things spiral out of control. And then finally, what people want is they want a successful retirement outcome. Now, this is where things get really uncomfortable. If we're going to have any uncomfortable moments together in our 30 minutes together today, this is probably the thing you're going to remember. Everyone on this call right now is either mathematically on track to retire successfully, or they're mathematically not on track to retire successfully. And the reason I say that is because it is just math. Are you saving this amount of money, getting this return over this period of time to end up with the amount of money that will provide a certain income to you? The longer you go in a relationship and you do not make an effort to get on track mathematically, the longer you're in denial and you're going to cause stress in your relationship. I'm going to say this a slightly different way because this is a big deal. If retirement is mostly a math problem and you're ignoring the math and you'll say, well, we got other things to deal with, we're going to figure retirement out later, you're making retirement harder, because one of the primary elements of successful retirement is giving your money time to grow. If you ignore that and you give your money less time to grow, you're going to add stress to your relationship. Now, one of the big factors in this is how much retirement has changed in the last 30 years. I wrote about this in USA Today a couple weeks ago. Actually, when Kyle was introducing me, he said, I used to write for USA Today, and for a second I thought his editor, or my editor, had put him in charge of breaking the news. I've lost my column. Well, I guess I'll find out after the call. But I wrote about the idea that in the 80s, we were in a period of time where pensions were starting to go away. And the average American worker didn't realize that the onus had shifted to them and their household. Because prior to that, like in 1975, 88% of people in the private sector had a pension, which meant you could work your entire career somewhere, you stopped working, and then you were getting paid by your employer in Social Security. And it sounds strange, but you really had nothing to do with your successful retirement outcome other than you didn't get fired. You had a pension. Now, today, to retire successfully, it is you and your partner getting in it together. So depending on whose statistics you believe, somewhere between 10 to 16% of people in the private sector today have a pension, which means a large group of people need to work together. And I think one of the main issues as to why this consistently is a problem, especially in marriage, is because once we make a bad decision, and instead of choosing to fix the bad decision or the bad behavior, instead, if we choose to become more accepting of the bad decision, we have a tolerance issue. Let me give you an example of this. I went to my physician in August of last year. This is 2017. And he told me that I look pretty healthy except for the heartburn I had explained to him. I had heartburn for 6 months. And I asked him for Prilosec. And he said, I'm not going to give you Prilosec because you will get fatter. And I said, doctor, that is implying that you currently think I am fat. And he said, I'm not giving you Prilosec. So it was a very uncomfortable moment. Basically what he said is, in taking a drug like that, it will make me more tolerant of the foods that give me heartburn. And those foods also tend to cause obesity. What happens financially is we tend to let ourselves off the hook. We let our partners off the hook with bad decisions. And when we do that, we increase our tolerance for suboptimal decisions. So we are getting less healthy financially as time goes by because we're not leaning into the signs that something is wrong. Here's what I mean. Okay, so this is a scatter plot. I happen to love this slide. Might be a little much for you, but I love it. I live by it. It's how we run our business. All right, here's how it works. Like right now, everyone on this call, everyone, Kyle, you too, everybody on this call, I want you to place yourself on the vertical line, the vertical axis. Do you feel good about your finances or do you feel bad about your finances? Are they pretty good or are they pretty bad based on your feeling? So if they're pretty good, you're going to place yourself pretty high up towards feeling good, and vice versa. If you're feeling bad, you would be below the x-axis towards the words feeling bad. The reality is there is a way to objectively measure anyone's financial life. So here's what ends up happening. People who self-evaluate as things are good, but the reality is things are bad, then those people are in denial, they're ignorant, or they're delusional. These are not good qualities. They're not good qualities as an employee of an organization. They're not good qualities of a person that you're staring back at in the mirror. And here's where the rubber hits the road. These are awful qualities to have in a spouse. If your spouse is in denial about your financial reality, or ignorant, willfully or otherwise, about your financial reality, or delusional, that is stressful. That means you are either going it alone or you're right there with them in group 4. Or it's possible that you or your significant other feel bad about your finances. Your finances are bad, so you're right, but you're not really changing behaviors and your decisions in order to change the outcome, which means maybe you're defeated, despondent, or resigned. Group 2, that's where there's one person that's a worrywart, someone, a nervous Nelly. All this alliteration. These are fun. People, Debbie Downer. People just like, we're terrible. But it's actually not that bad. They just feel bad, but their finances aren't that bad. That's a very common thing, and it brings anxiety and nervousness and a lack of confidence. And then finally, there's a group of people, you could be in it, that feel good about their finances, and they should because they are good, and it's all purposeful. What are the chances that you and your significant other are in the same category and it's a good category to be in? Anecdotally, the chances are really slim. Unless you're the most in-tune couple ever, you have a monthly budget meeting, you open a bottle of wine and light candles and listen. It is very likely you are in a different category than your significant other, and that is a problem. So here are 8 rules, maybe suggestions, practices that can help to clear this up. We talked about it earlier, but this is super important. A dollar doesn't equal a vote. In most relationships I see, and again, this is anecdotal, I don't have any stats to back this up, there is a difference of income. Someone makes significantly more than the other person. And oftentimes, the person that makes more is given more leeway in terms of what they're allowed to spend. This could be manifested in several different ways. Separate checking accounts, the access to more of the family's money, even if it isn't a joint checking account. And that's a really damaging thing. And you get into some weird stuff, and we may even talk about it here in a little bit, where couples give each other, this is our monthly allowance. You're allowed to do what you want with your money. I'm allowed to do what I want with my money. And this is supposed to bring us some sort of peace and understanding. Well, that's an interesting concept, and I've seen people make it work. It's a really dumb concept if the couple is struggling financially, because there's no accountability in that. If I'm $30,000 deep in credit card debt and I get $300 a month to go play golf or build my bourbon collection, that's objectively stupid, right? And just because it's my allowance, I can do whatever I want, that goes back to tolerance. I'm becoming tolerant, excessively tolerant of a really bad idea. And if my significant other doesn't hold me accountable to that, they're becoming too tolerant too. Developing household goals is essential. And this is where a lot of couples get stuck, because it turns into, what are we buying for the house? We wanted to finish the basement, and we definitely need new windows, and I'd love to replace the tile in the bathroom. And it starts to spiral out of control pretty quickly. If you've never set joint financial goals with your significant other, I have to admit, it's a kind of a terrible process. It really is. But at least going into it, you now know it's going to be terrible. And your goal is to set stability goals. Retirement year, how much you want to pay for your kids' college, how much you want to have in your emergency fund. It's not when are we replacing the dining room table. It's not when are we going to Paris. Now you can sprinkle those things in, but those are consumption goals. In order, good, better, best. These are how goals work. Consumption goals, they're good. I'd rather you save for a couch than buy a couch on a credit card. So consumption goal is reasonably good. Debt elimination goals are better. Those are better goals. I'd like to pay off our student loans. Best, accumulation goals. I would like to accumulate money for retirement, for college. Now, this one's a tricky one, and this typically is the sign that something's not right. Revenge spending. Well, you went to Vegas with the boys, so I'm going here with whatever. That's a really common thing, revenge spending, and it is the classic two wrongs don't make a right. Now, this is where I do feel like I'm starting to feel like a guest on Oprah where I'm giving marriage advice. I'm starting to feel a little sweaty and nervous about it, but it's true. Every time a couple has sat in front of me and talked about their finances and I sense revenge spending, you shudder a little bit, right? It's just not a healthy thing. Next, and this is a very, very, very common problem. You'll know that because I said very 3 times. No loaners, none, 0. You can't do this alone. If you're in a relationship, a committed relationship, and the other person doesn't want to be a part of it, you're not letting them be a part of it, or whatever, that won't work. If your plan is to eventually split up and everyone understands it, that'll work. But if your goal is to actually live together forever, stay married or stay in whatever relationship you're in, you have to work on this together. And as I said before, you're raised by different people. You're going to have different aptitudes for this stuff. You're going to have different qualities. Some people are going to be good. Some people are going to be bad. I think it's really about splitting responsibilities. So here's how ours work. My wife runs the day-to-day finances. I run the investing. I run the insurance. And then together we set goals, right? Sometimes one person pays the bills. One person sets up the insurance. One person does the investing. And the other person is left completely in the dark. And not to get macabre here on a lunch and learn on a, what is it, Wednesday? Sure. If someone dies, which happens, and that person is the person left in the dark, you will be cussed at. You'll be in the grave and people will be angry at you. Not because you're gone, because you left them in a terrible situation. It is incredibly uncomfortable and it is incredibly common. And this is a good one. Like, you may be excited about what you've learned here today. You may be mortified about what you've learned here today. But what I can't have you do is to go home and drop all this knowledge on your significant other. It doesn't work. Do not have spontaneous money conversations. What would make sense is to say, honey, or whatever your schmoopy name is for your person, this weekend, can we take 20 minutes and talk about some financial stuff? Allow the person to prepare their mind for the conversation. Do not, under any circumstances, spring a financial conversation on someone. My wife and I happen to have a money conversation on the 5th of every single month. And I know what you're thinking. Yes, I am a lot of fun to be married to. No, but it is our outlet to talk about the previous month's results and to talk about what is coming up in the next month that will require extra money. Your calendar is your best budgeting tool. What is happening in the next 30 days? Finally, offer an olive branch. There's something that you know you're not good at financially. It's your weakness. If you're doing a SWOT analysis on you, financial SWOT analysis, what is your weakness? When you start your money conversation, why don't you own up to it? And by the way, if you can't find a weakness, that is in itself a weakness. You have to be empathetic. You have to be vulnerable, especially if there's conflict with money and relationships. And this is controversial, but I don't, as you could imagine, I don't particularly care. Don't borrow from your parents. Don't borrow from their parents. It always is awkward. Is it always awkward? And gender gets tied up in that too. If you can make it happen, try to maintain your financial life absent assistance from other generation or family members. Commingling generations is tough. Now, culturally, I will say some cultures, that is how it is. I know we've done work for groups in Hawaii. And in Hawaii, multi-generations live in the same household. And it is very familial in that sense. For those on the mainland, or whatever we're called here, most people should stay separate from their parents. Do not have a secret account. That's another good best practice. Do not have a secret bank account. There was a sweeps package in our local news, one of our local news stations. The concept they were covering, these sweeps packages, they're always ridiculous. It was called micro cheating. They were doing a segment on micro cheating, when you're sort of small acts of infidelity. And they're not the normal cheating, right? There's some weird things like messaging an old relationship on Facebook, right? One of them was having a secret checking account. I have to kind of agree with that, or a secret savings account. Now, if you have one so you could surprise them with a vacation, that's obviously different. But if you have one so you can spend at your whimsy, that's not so great. Final thing I want to cover, and then we'll open it up for questions. Oh, I should have said, ask me questions whenever you want. It's not going to bother me. But we're going to take your questions here in a second. So start typing them in the Q&A box, and we'll answer as many as I can. People always ask, should we have one checking account? And my answer is, it's not because I'm callous or apathetic, but my answer is I don't actually care. It's whatever works for you. If what you're doing now works objectively, then that's the best way. If what you're doing now doesn't work, try a different method. A lot of people like to get into, we have one account. That's great. Logistically, that actually does not work very well for our household, our being my wife and I's. My wife stays at home with children, and I have an income from what I do for a living. My income splits into two different accounts. The account that I primarily manage pays the mortgage, the groceries, and our health insurance. And my wife's account that she primarily manages pays all the household expenses. It's both our money, but logistically, as much as I travel and whatnot, it just makes sense to do it that way. Both accounts are our money. We trust each other. I think sometimes logistically, the way people spend money with online banking and debit card usage, that having one account can actually be dangerous, especially since that some people, culturally, people are getting married later in life, which means they have their own established methods of what their income does. Oh, it's pretty much what I got. Again, I'm not giving you any secrets here. I'm just trying to let you know that a lot of this is about effort and about extending grace to your significant other. We're not all good at different things. And if you have someone supporting you and you have the accountability from your significant other, it can go a long way. Kyle, I'm going to bring you back on if that's all right. And of course, take any questions if people have any. I thought it was pretty comprehensive, so I'm not surprised there are not questions flowing in. Kyle.
Yes, yes, very comprehensive. We loved it. And thank you for that presentation. I've had actually a few questions come in even via email. One of them was, my spouse and I are a young couple, and we are interested in buying a house, and our parents do want to help us with the down payment. How do we navigate that sort of scenario between our marriage, such a large purchase, and a large down payment requirement?
God, I love that question. I almost feel like it was planted, honestly, because I feel like somehow someone found out that that's my favorite question, and then they asked it. There's two things that make me nervous. Number one, anytime you borrow a down payment, whether it be from your parents, your great uncle, or whoever, anytime you borrow or are gifted a down payment, you think in some respect that you're fooling the bank or you're making yourself more attractive as a borrower. But on some level, I think you're actually fooling yourself, right? I think you are putting yourself into a scenario that you couldn't otherwise qualify for based on someone else's generosity, which means that when it comes to home ownership, anyone on this call that is a homeowner knows what a pain in the neck it is to have to fix what is broken with your emergency fund. And unless you go into home ownership with money and savings, significant money and savings, and you have the propensity to consistently save money, you should just rent, because homeownership is expensive. Now, the other side of that is, I'll get off my soapbox. The other side of that is make it crystal clear. Is it a loan or is it a gift? Is it a loan or is it a gift? Because that gets super murky. And I find that the boomer generation typically has more confidence in their retirement readiness than they should. They are in a relatively better position than a young buyer, but that doesn't put them in a good position. So money could be lent that shouldn't be lent objectively, and that's where it can get awkward.
Fantastic. What about this one? Should I have both a 401k and an IRA? And should my spouse have both? What's the solution here?
Yeah, I don't think there's any rule of thumb there. I mean, you always want to at least contribute up to the match within your 401k or your retirement plan at work. But here's the bigger issue. And talk to your investment advisor about the specifics of which one's better from a fee and tax perspective. But here's where I'm at. Add all of them up. I don't really care. I just want 12 to 15% of your household income going towards retirement on an annual basis. And that includes the match. So if you put in 3% and your employer puts in 3% and your spouse puts in 3% and their employer puts in 3%, that is 12%. That's what I care about. 12%, 12 to 15% of your total household income towards retirement. And I don't particularly care whether it's in 401k, as long as you hit the match, or an IRA. But talk to your financial advisor.
Fantastic. And then here's another one. For our household spending between the both of us, should we create different, and I'm using quotes here, buckets for things like entertainment, vacation, eating out, education spending, maybe on children, stuff like that?
Yes, and it can be however formal or informal you want it to be. It's really just to keep you on the same page. A budget has one purpose: to hold you accountable to your financial goals. So if you don't have financial goals, what does it really matter if you have a budget or not? It's not holding you accountable to anything. So if you have both joint financial goals and a budget, that budget allows you to have the uncomfortable conversation of, why did you go to Starbucks 27 times last month? We're never going to be able to pay for little Jimmy's college. Like, that is a good conversation. It's an uncomfortable conversation. But without joint financial goals and without a budget, that conversation cannot happen. So yeah, put it in buckets, but those buckets also need to include your goals, or what's the point?
Thank you. Another one came in. How often should we review our budget?
Once a month, 20 minutes. And here's the key. Don't, like I said, don't have spontaneous conversations. Don't come home on a random Tuesday on the 25th of the month and be like, oh, can we talk? No, save it for the 5th. Like, trust me, it is so tedious to talk about money all the time. Save it for the 5th. That's where you have, I like the financial 5th just because it's more alliteration. That's my whole life. Pete the Planner, financial 5th, Debbie Downer. I'm very strange that way. Once a month. Once a year will not cut it. And once every 6 months doesn't work. Once a month. And that 20-minute meeting turns into about a 12-minute meeting with a little practice.
And last question that I have is, what do you think of websites like mint.com, or I think emoney.com, which allows sort of spending tracking?
Yeah, I like it if you use the data to influence your behavior. Frankly, I like to manually enter my money into an Excel spreadsheet, my spending, because I don't like my data aggregated at like a mint.com, because I find I don't dig into the data as much. If I see the pretty pie chart that says 12% of my spending went to dining out, I could go, oh, that stinks. But if I entered every transaction and realized it was 16 times in a 2-week period and I was going here too much, that's what changes behavior, not the aggregate data. Now, I know you can dive down deep with those services, and you should, but just, again, anecdotally, I don't need numbers here. Anecdotally, I just find that some people can misuse the convenience. Understand, and I'll leave you with this, and again, I'm thankful for having this opportunity and for having One America have me be part of this today. I'll leave you with this. Convenience is when you exchange money for time, right? When you do things that are too convenient, you're either trying to save time when you shouldn't, or you're trying to save money when you shouldn't. And that creates a tremendous amount of trouble. I see we have another chat coming in. How often do you enter spending in the spreadsheet? I'll answer that on the fly. Here's how we do it at the monthly budget meeting. So we grab our bank statement on the 5th, we print it out that morning or just look online, and then we talk through. My wife will read, okay, on the 5th, you went to Office Depot. Yes, it's horrendously tedious in the moment, but it allows us to talk through the activity when the other person wasn't there. That is accountability. Because if I'm getting into a behavior that does not serve our household goals, we talk about it right then and there. Now, you can do it more often than that, but I find you won't talk about it, or you shouldn't talk about it every day. And I find it to be a little too tedious to come home and do that every day. But again, whatever works for you. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, try something new. So Kyle, thank you so much for having me. If people want to learn more, go certainly. There's some resources at oneamerica.com or PeteThePlanner.com. So thanks so much for having me today.
Thank you, Pete. Much appreciated. Thank you for the presentation. We love the slides. Just so everybody knows, I can email these slides out at a later date, and then this recording will be available at a later date, and I will help manage that process. So if you have any questions, go ahead and send them my way. And again, thank you, Pete, for your time. Have a great day, and everybody else have a great remainder of your Wednesday.